3. That is the last number Zara counts before she hits the floor of the Crimson Den. She counts because that is what she does. She measures. She does not panic. 1. As the gate opens. 2. As the cold rushes up to meet her. 3. As the stone floor arrives and every bone in her body registers the impact at once. She lies still for a moment, cataloging. Ribs bruised, not broken. Left wrist jarred. Right knee bleeding through the torn hem of her wedding dress. If you have ever felt invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to love you, this story is for you. Stay with me. Because the girl they threw away is about to become the woman they kneel to. Like this story. Subscribe for new narratives every week. And don't go anywhere, because what happens next in that alpha's den will change everything. Above her, far above her, the iron gate swings shut. She hears Dorian's footsteps moving away down the corridor. Measured, unhurried. The footsteps of a man who has just completed a task and is already thinking about the next one. The distant sound of music drifts through the stone. The wedding band, still playing in the great hall above, for guests who do not yet know the bride is gone. Zara closes her eyes. She opens them. She listens. The den is dark. The kind of dark that has weight to it, that presses against your eyes like a hand. But it is not silent. Somewhere in that darkness, something is breathing. Large, slow, close. And it is not moving toward her. It is waiting. Zara does not wait to find out why. She moves before the pain in her knee fully registers, rolling onto her hands, pushing upright, scanning the dark with eyes that are already adjusting. The den is vast. She can feel the size of it in the echo of her own breathing, in the way the air moves with a current that suggests tunnels or chambers beyond what she can see. The ceiling is high. The walls are stone. The floor is cracked marble, older than the estate above it, older than the Voss name, older than anything she has a reference for. And in the far corner, barely visible, something enormous shifts in the dark. She runs. Not away from it. There is nowhere to run to. She runs toward the wall, toward the thing she spotted in the first half-second of her eyes adjusting. A ledge. A natural shelf of stone, jutting out from the wall about 6 feet up, crumbling at the edges but wide enough to lie on. She climbs with her bleeding knee and her jarred wrist and the torn wedding dress tangling around her legs, and she pulls herself up and presses her back against the wall and breathes. Below her, the silhouette moves. It is massive, wolf-shaped, but wrong. Too large, the proportions distorted by the curse that made it, the musculature of a man trapped inside the form of a beast. It circles the den floor in long, slow passes, and every time it completes a circuit, it stops below her ledge and looks up. Its eyes are yellow. Not animal yellow, something older and more terrible than that. The yellow of a mind still present inside something it was never meant to be. It does not charge the ledge, it circles, it stops, it looks up. All night. When dawn light filters through a crack in the ceiling, thin and gray, and barely enough to see by, the beast withdraws to the far wall and lies down. It does not sleep. It watches her with those yellow eyes from across the length of the den. Zara watches back. She is exhausted, cold, hungry, and sitting on a 6-inch ledge in a ruined wedding dress with dried blood on her knee. She should be broken. She is not broken. She is thinking. And sometime before the light changes, without deciding to, without understanding why, she begins to hum. A single, low note. Tuneless. The thing she has always done when something living is frightened. Her mother's voice rises in her memory. Stop that, Zara. It's embarrassing. Stop that. Across the den, the beast goes completely still. It is still listening when she finally falls asleep. The following is what Zara thinks about on the second day, when the beast is sleeping and she has nothing to do but remember. Her father received the letter from Dorian Voss on a Tuesday morning in early autumn. Zara knows this because she was in the garden with a sparrow that had flown into the window glass and stunned itself, sitting in the dirt with it cupped in her hands, humming. And her father came to the garden door and looked at her with the expression he always wore when she was doing something he could not explain and called her inside. The letter proposed a marriage. It offered, in exchange, the restoration of the Vane family title. stripped 2 generations back. The reason for everything. The wound her family had organized their entire lives around. Saw her father read it to her at the table with his hand shaking slightly. Not from distress, but from the particular tremor of a man who believes, finally, that God has remembered him. Zara asked why. Why would Dorian Voss, Alpha Lord of the most powerful estate in the Northern Territories, a man who could have his pick of any high-born daughter in the kingdom, want her? Her father told her not to ask questions that made her sound ungrateful. She asked again 3 weeks later, when Dorian came to dinner. She asked it carefully, politely, framed as curiosity rather than suspicion. "What is it about our family that drew your interest, my lord?" Dorian smiled at her across the table. A controlled smile, correct, never quite warm, and said he had heard she was remarkable, and that he valued remarkable things. She should have pressed. She did not press. She had spent 18 years learning that pressing cost more than it bought, and she was tired, and the title would fix everything. And perhaps she was wrong to be suspicious, and perhaps she was making problems out of nothing the way she always did, the way her family always said she did. She told herself this. The night before the wedding, in her guest chamber in the east wing of the Voss estate, Zara lay on her back in the dark and heard something through the floor. Breathing, slow, heavy, rhythmic, something large and alive far below the stone beneath her bed. She lay very still and listened for a long time. Then she got up and pressed her ear to the floor and listened harder. It was breathing. It was unmistakably breathing. Not pipes, not the settling of old stone. She stood up. Why, she stood in the middle of the room for a long time. She told herself it was the pipes. She got back into bed. That is what Zara thinks about on the second day. Not Dorian's betrayal. She has already processed that, filed it, moved past it with the focused efficiency she applies to everything that cannot be changed. What she cannot stop thinking about is that moment on the floor, the choice she made, the thing she chose not to know. The den is not only Dorian's punishment for her, it is the consequence of every time she trained herself to stop. On the third day, the beast sleeps. Zara climbs down from the ledge. She moves carefully, keeping the wall at her back, watching the beast's flank rise and fall with slow, heavy breath. It does not stir. Once she moves to the far side of the den, the side she has not yet reached, and she searches. She finds the names in the far corner, where the light from the ceiling crack barely reaches. Scratched into the stone with something sharp, a ring, she thinks, or a brooch pin, or a piece of broken chain, at varying heights, as if each woman had found her own patch of wall to mark. 11 names, 11 dates. She reads them twice, slowly, pressing her fingers into each carved letter. The gaps between the dates range from 2 days to 3 weeks. 2 days for the ones who panicked, she thinks, and 3 weeks for the ones who didn't. A terrible kind of logic. The last name on the wall is accompanied by something none of the others have. A single additional word scratched so deep and so hard that the stone around it cracked. Remember. Zara stands in front of that word for a long time. Then she turns and walks back across the den, still moving carefully, still watching the beast's flank rise and fall. And she does something that she will not, afterward, be able to fully explain. She gets close. Close enough to see the detail of the coat, the scarring on the massive forepaws, the way the curse has distorted a frame that was once, she thinks, extraordinary. Close enough to see the mark on the left shoulder. A raised white scar, older than the beast form, carved into the skin beneath the fur by something deliberate and formal. The Voss bloodline mark. Identical. She has seen it enough times in the past 18 months to know. To the one above the estate's front gate. This is not a monster Dorian keeps because he is powerful. This is a person Dorian keeps because he is dangerous. Zara stands in the dark beside the sleeping beast and looks at the mark on his shoulder and something in her chest, something that has been suspended in shock since the gate closed, clicks into place like a key turning. She climbs back up to her ledge. She starts to think. On the fourth day, Zara climbs down and does not climb back up. She crosses the den floor and sits down. Not beside the beast, not provocatively close, but 10 feet away, in the open, where he can see her clearly and she can see him. She folds her hands in her lap. She looks at him directly. He watches her with the yellow eyes. She starts talking. not to negotiate, not to plead. She talks because silence in the dark is its own kind of dying, and she has decided she refuses both kinds. She talks about the names on the wall, all 11 of them, the dates, the gaps between them. She talks about the mark on his shoulder and what she thinks it means. She tells him her theory about Dorian, about the title, the marriage, the gate, laying it out methodically, the way you build an argument when you want someone to understand the shape of the thing you are describing. She talks until the light in the ceiling crack fades. She climbs back up to the ledge. She comes back the next morning and does it again. On the second day, halfway through her accounting of the Voss family bloodline succession, which she has had 18 months to memorize, having understood even then that knowing things was the only power available to her, the beast moves. Not toward her. He crosses the den in slow, deliberate steps and sits down below her ledge, between her and the gate, his back to her, his yellow eyes facing outward toward the iron door at the far end of the den. A position that is unmistakably protective. Zara stops talking. She looks at the back of his massive head for a moment. Then she keeps going. On the third day, she asks him directly, "Do you have a name?" The silence stretches so long that she thinks she has been wrong about everything. Wrong about the mark, wrong about the eyes, wrong about the something present she has been reading into an animal's behavior because she needed it to be there. Then, from the dark below her, one word. Low. Rough. Unused. Yichi Kyle. Zara breathes out slowly. Kyle, she says back, as if confirming it. As if saying it back to him is a way of making it real. Below her, the beast, Kyle, is very still. My name is Zara, she says. I think your brother put us both in here, and I think we should do something about that. On the 8th day, someone else comes through the gate. Zara hears it before she sees it. The scrape of the iron bolt, the groan of old hinges. And she's on her feet on the ledge before the sound finishes, because she has memorized every sound this den makes, and that one means only one thing. The girl drops through. Zara is already moving, down from the ledge, across the den floor, reaching the spot just in time to break the fall with her own body, both of them hitting the stone in a tangle of limbs. The girl is shaking so hard her teeth are chattering. She is young, younger than Zara, in a servant's dress, clutching something against her chest with both arms wrapped around it, like she would rather break every bone in her body than let it go. I've got you, Zara says. I've got you. You're down. You're alive. Breathe. The girl breathes. Her name is Lena. She was a housemaid on the 3rd floor of the East Wing. She was in a corridor she was not supposed to be in. But she was there on purpose, she says, and she has been there on purpose before, many times, and she is not sorry. She has been watching Dorian for 2 years. She has been keeping records. The oilskin packet she is holding contains every payment, every name, every arrangement he ever made. In his own words, in Mara's handwriting, documented and dated and witnessed. She came to get proof. She got more than she planned for. How long have you been doing this? Zara asks. Since the 3rd one, Lena says quietly. Since Mira. I knew Mira. Zara thinks of the name on the wall, the one that said, remember. She does not say anything. That night, the full moon rises. Zara feels it before she sees it. A change in the air, a tension that has no source. Cal's breathing shifting from the slow rhythm she has learned to read to something faster and more ragged. She gets Lena onto the ledge and tells her not to come down and does not explain, because there is no time to explain, because across the den, Kyle is on his feet and the curse is pulling at him like a tide, and she can see in the yellow eyes that he is losing. She steps down onto the floor. She stands between Lena and Kale in the middle of the Crimson Den, and she does the only thing she has. She talks. She hums. The same low note, the same tuneless sound she has used every night since the first. She keeps her eyes on his and she hums and she talks and she hums again, not stopping, not letting the silence in, because silence is where the curse lives, and sound is the only territory she has left to hold. Kyle presses his forehead against the far wall. His whole body is shaking. He holds. He holds for 3 hours. When the moon passes its peak and the pressure eases, he slides down the wall and lies on the floor with his chest heaving and his eyes closed. And Zara stands in the middle of the den with her legs shaking and does not move until she is certain he is still. Or then she sits down on the floor next to him, not 10 feet away, next to him. "Why did you hold?" she asks quietly. "You were losing. You could have stopped fighting it. Why did you hold?" For a long time he does not answer. Then, barely audible. "Because you were humming, and I wanted to hear how it ended." Zara does not say anything. She does not move. She hums, quietly, just for him, until his breathing slows and deepens and she is certain he is asleep. Then, she lets herself shake. On the 9th day, Zara reads him the names. She sits below his ledge. He has taken her ledge, or perhaps given it to Lena, and either way she finds she no longer needs the height. And she reads from memory, slowly, the way you read something that deserves to be heard properly. 11 names, 11 dates. Even she pauses on the last one. Mira, with the word remember. She scratched it so hard the stone cracked, Zara says. I think she knew someone would come eventually. I think she wanted them to know she was real, that she existed, that what happened to her was not nothing. Kyle is very still. If you die in this den, Zara says, every one of those names dies with you, because you are the only alpha in this kingdom with the authority to make Dorian answer for them. A dead alpha cannot give testimony. A disappeared alpha cannot correct the record. And if I die in here, she pauses, I am not asking you to save me. I am asking you to witness. I am asking you to be alive and present and in possession of a throne when this is over, so that those 11 names mean something. She stops talking. Kyle is quiet for a long time. Then he gets up. He moves to the east wall. And Zara realizes, watching him, that he has been to this wall before. That the stone here is already fractured in the upper left corner, already compromised, already tested by someone who has been thinking about this for longer than she knew. He has been waiting, not for rescue, for a reason. She gave him one. The first crack takes an hour. The second takes less. The wall comes down on the third. Midnight. The corridors of the Voss estate are carpeted in deep red, lit by oil lamps in iron brackets, lined with portraits of men who all have the same jaw and none of whom are Kale. Somewhere in the east wing a clock ticks. Somewhere above them the last of the evening's guests are being shown to their rooms. A massive, scarred wolf beast moves through those corridors, flanked by 2 women in torn dresses, one of them holding an oilskin packet against her chest with the focused grip of someone who has held onto it through a gate drop and a full moon and 11 days underground and does not intend to let go now. The first guard they encounter is at the junction of the east and main corridors. He raises his spear. He looks at the beast. He looks at the 2 women. He looks at the beast again. He puts the spear down and steps aside. The second guard tries to run. He makes it 4 steps before his legs stop cooperating, and he simply sits down on the carpet and stares. The third raises his weapon and means it. Kyle disarms him with a single paw movement. Careful, precise, the minimum force necessary, and sets the weapon down against the wall with a gentleness that is somehow more frightening than violence would have been. They reach the great hall. Through the double doors they can hear voices, the low, formal cadence of a council session being called to order, papers shuffling, chairs scraping on stone. Dorian's voice, somewhere in the middle of it, giving instructions about the morning's agenda. Zara stops at the threshold. She looks down at herself. Torn wedding dress, 11 days old, dried blood on her knee, bare feet on cold stone, hair loose and tangled, and almost certainly terrible. She straightens her spine. She smooths the front of the dress with both hands. A gesture so habitual and so absurd, given the circumstances, that Lena makes a sound beside her that might, under different conditions, so have been a laugh. Zara walks in. The great hall goes silent the moment she crosses the threshold. 30 faces turn toward her, lords, advisors, council members, scribes, and then past her to to the doorway she came through, and the thing standing in it. Several chairs scrape back from the table simultaneously. Someone knocks over a glass. Dorian, at the head of the table, goes very still. Zara walks to the center of the room and stops. "My name is Zara Vane," she says. Her voice is steady. She made certain of that in the corridor, running through it once in her head, checking for shake. There is none. 11 days ago, I was dropped through a gate in the floor of this estate by the man sitting at the head of that table. I was not the first. I want to give you the names of the ones who came before me. The room is absolutely silent. She gives them the names. All 11, with their dates, with the gaps between them. She watches faces change as she speaks, recognition on some of them, for names they were told belonged to women who fled or never arrived or simply ceased to be relevant. When she finishes, she says, "Lena." Lena steps forward and sets the oilskin packet on the council table. She opens it. 2 years of records spread across the polished wood. Payments, names, dates, movement logs, all of it in Dorian's own hand or Mara's. All of it documented with a servant's eye for detail and a witness's understanding of what evidence needs to survive. The beast in the doorway, Zara says, is not a beast. His name is Voss. He is the firstborn of this bloodline, the rightful alpha of this estate and this territory. And he has been imprisoned beneath this floor for 4 years while the man at that table used his name and his title and his seat. She looks directly at Dorian. Dorian says, "This is madness." 3 council members stand up. Not together, separately, with the hesitant, decisive movement of people who have been waiting for permission to say something. "My lord," the eldest of them says, "the bloodline mark is visible from here." Mara rises from her seat at the far end of the table. Her hands are already moving. The opening gesture of a binding spell, precise and practiced, the kind of movement you only recognize if you know what you are looking at. Lena knows what she is looking at. She reaches into the oilskin packet and pulls out the second set of documents. Smaller, tighter, are written in a different hand, and throws them across the table. "Her payments," Lena says. "Her handwriting. Every woman she helped disappear, with the price beside the name." Mara's hands stop. The spell dies in the air between them. Into the silence, Zara says, "She did not curse him for Dorian's gold. She cursed him because he was the only authority in this kingdom who could investigate what she was doing. She needed him underground. She needed him a monster. Dorian was her method. She was his." Mara looks at Zara across the length of the council table. Something moves in her expression. Not fear exactly, but the cold recalculation of someone who has just watched their entire architecture come apart and is already looking for the exit. There is no exit. Zara turns away from her and walks toward Kale. Kale stands in the doorway of the great hall and watches her come. She stops in front of him, close, the way she has been close since the 4th day, without apology and without performance. She raises her hand and presses it flat against his chest, against the curse mark beneath the fur, the same raised scar she first found on the 3rd day when he was sleeping, and she was brave enough to get close. She does not speak a spell. She has no spell to speak. She says his name. His full name, Kale Aldrich Voss, firstborn of the Voss bloodline, rightful alpha of the Northern Territories, the name that was removed from every record in the kingdom 4 years ago, the name that has not been spoken aloud in this estate since the night the gate closed. She says it the way you say a name when you mean it completely, yet when you are not hedging or hoping or leaving yourself room to retreat. When you are simply telling the truth out loud. The mate bond ignites. It is not dramatic. It is not an explosion. It is the feeling of a door blown open by wind that has been pressing against it for 11 days, sudden and inevitable and quiet at its center. The way the most irrevocable things always are. The light comes from the mark. Gold, spreading outward through the beast form like warmth through cold hands. And the form itself begins to crack. Not violently, but the way ice cracks in spring. The way things break when they were only ever held together by cold. The sound it makes is like breaking ice, like something releasing. Kale stands in the great hall of his own estate, a man, himself. For the first time in 4 years, he is not what the room expected. He is not bewildered or overwhelmed or soft with relief. He is 32 years old, and he has spent 4 years underground, and he is standing in a room with his brother and the woman who cursed him, and a council that watched all of it happen, and his eyes are absolutely clear. He looks at Zara first. One long moment, the kind of look that is a whole conversation compressed into a single second. She looks back. Something passes between them that the room cannot hear and does not need to. Then he turns to face the hall. The room understands, without being told, what it is looking at. Mara of the Eastern Territories, Kale says, and his voice fills the hall without effort, without performance, the voice of someone who has been the rightful owner of this room his entire life. You are bound pending trial for the curse, the imprisonment, and the deaths of 11 women whose names I will read into the official record before this council adjourns tonight. He turns to Dorian. Dorian, who has not moved from the head of the table, who has been sitting very straight and very still with the expression of a man who knew, somewhere deep down, that this day existed, looks at his brother and says nothing. The Crimson Den, Kale says, is beneath the East Wing. You know where it is. You will be escorted there directly. Mara is bound by the council's own guards with her hands behind her back, her power stripped by the documentation Lena laid on that table. Every bought silence canceled, every legal protection she purchased dissolved by her own handwriting. Dorian is taken from his chair and walked down the corridor he used 11 times before. The council kneels. Not because Kale asks, not because ceremony demands it, because the evidence is on the table and the bloodline mark is visible and 30 people in that room have just watched a man come back from the dead, and some things do not require instruction. 3 weeks later, the Great Hall is full. Every lord and lady of the Northern Territories, every council member, the estate staff, the guards, the people from the village at the base of the hill who were told only that something had changed and were invited to come and see. Kale stands at the front of the hall and addresses his people for the first time in 4 years. He does not begin with policy. He does not begin with proclamation or decree or any of the administrative restoration that has occupied the past 3 weeks. The records corrected, the name reinstated, the 11 names entered into the official registry with their full dates and circumstances, and the words wrongfully killed beside each one. He begins with the names. All 11 of them. With their dates. Spoken slowly, clearly, into a hall so silent that the candles are the loudest thing in it. When he finishes, he is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "They were not forgotten. They were remembered by a woman who had every reason not to survive long enough to remember them. Everything that follows, every correction, every restoration, every day of this new era, is built on the foundation of what she carried out of that den. Her name is Zara Vane. She is not my rescued bride. She is not my grateful subject. She is the woman who walked into the dark, found the king, and brought him home. Beside him, Zara does not fidget. She does not smooth her dress or drop her eyes or make herself smaller for the weight of the room's attention. She stands in her full space, chin level, shoulders back, the way she stood in the den on the 4th day when she climbed down from the ledge and sat on the floor in front of a beast and started talking. She has not cried once. Not in the den, not in the hall, not in any of the 3 weeks that followed, in which a great many things happened that most people would have cried about. When he finishes, Kale turns to her. The room falls away. There is only the two of them and the space between them that has been closing since the first night in the dark. He says quietly, only for her, "You were never a sacrifice. You were always the answer." Zara smiles. Not for the room, not for the record, not because it is expected or required or appropriate, because she wants to. That is the last image. A woman who was thrown into the dark, who counted to 3 on the way down and hummed in the silence, and read 11 names off a wall and stood in a great hall in a ruined dress and said the truth out loud, smiling in her own space, because she wants to, not because anyone is watching. Closing CTA. If this story moved something in you, if any part of Zara's journey felt like something you needed to hear today, then you already know what to do. Like this video. It tells me this kind of story matters to you, and it helps more people find it. Leave a comment below. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. Was it the humming? The names on the wall? Or the moment Kyle said, "Because I wanted to hear how it ended"? Tell me. I read every single one. Subscribe so you never miss a story. New narratives drop every week. Dark romance, cursed alphas, and women who walk into the den and come out with the king. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the thing they were told to stop doing might be the exact thing that saves them. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay feral, stay luminous.